when you are in effect buying more from other countries than they're buying from you, you are handing them investment funds. I mean, it's the nature. You give them little pieces of paper, and they can convert that into buying. They can buy government bonds. They can buy buildings here. And Japanese bought Pebble Beach in the 1980s when they were running a big surplus. I mean, so you are giving up claim checks on our country, essentially, in exchange for having more consumption now than you're producing in this country. And so I do think that there's levels of trade deficit that bother me. I had some system that did not make it country specific. But I think the world has gotten better and better, and there's no question that countries may try and take advantage in this or that, and we've actually been guilty of that sometimes in the past too. I don't think leaders in other countries, whether China or 100 other countries, are not smart enough to realize that it's in the interest to keep promoting trade. The more we trade over time, and we don't want it to be a question of where we import 20% of our GDP and we export nothing. Now, we could all quit working, and we could hand little pieces of paper to the rest of the world, and they could keep sending us food, and they could send us autos, and they can send us all kinds of things. But eventually they have claims on all our wealth. So we do want to have policies where the overall trade deficit does not get out of hand in relation to GDP. And I've been arguing that for a long time.
Guys, I'm going to take a break right now. We were going to keep going. We have both Bill Gates and Charlie Munger who are going to be joining us at the top of the hour, but Charlie Munger's here early, and I don't want him sitting on the sidelines. So we're going to take a break so we can bring him right over. And we'll have more coming up with these two in just a few moments. Guys are ready to kill me because I'm calling an audible. But Charlie Munger's sitting here, and I want him on set if he's here. So right now, we'll take a very quick break. When we come back, we'll be joined by Charlie Munger, the vice chairman of Berkshire Hathaway. Stick around. Good morning again, everybody, and welcome back to Omaha, Nebraska, where we have been live for almost the last 2 hours with Warren Buffett, the chairman and CEO of Berkshire Hathaway. We are joined right now by Berkshire's vice chairman, Charlie Munger, who's sitting down with us and joining us. And Charlie, thank you so much for being with us today. I really appreciate you being here.
Well, I'm delighted to be here.
Well, let's talk about this. Between the two of you...
I'm delighted to be anywhere.
Between the two of you, you have 181 years of experience, and you've been doing this annual meeting for 53 years. I thought we could take just a minute or two for both of you to reflect on these meetings, how they've evolved over time, and what it is that you enjoy so much about sitting with each other. Charlie, what do you think? Why don't you start?
Well, it's my hometown where I was raised. And of course, I like the company, and I like the shareholders, and I like the festival, and everybody's having a good time. And we're celebrating values as well as ourselves. And so, of course, I like it.
Warren, what's it like sitting next to Charlie on the stage?
I always learn something, and I certainly get surprised. And Charlie and I, we worked in the same grocery store less than 4 miles from here. We didn't work at the same time, so we didn't know each other until 20 years later. But we've got an extremely good partnership, and business is more fun, just as life is more fun with a good personal partner. And to have a great business partner. We've accomplished more, but we've also had way more fun. And Charlie and I, and this is true, we disagree on a lot of things, not that many, but some. We've never had an argument in the entire time we've known each other, which is almost 60 years now.
What's one thing that Charlie's done for you? A decision, an arena, something about your life that you listen to Charlie and you're better off for it?
Charlie has given me the ultimate gift that a person can give to somebody else. He's made me a better person than I would otherwise have been. And that's the most you can do for somebody else. And I've listened to him. Not too many people I listen to, but Charlie, he's given me a lot of good advice over time. And I may hate to take it to a certain degree, but sometimes. But my decisions have been better. But I've lived a better life because of Charlie.
Charlie, has Warren done anything for you?
Well, he talked me out of leaving law practice, which turned out to be a very good idea. Now, Warren, this is a place, Berkshire, where everybody's done a lot for everybody else, and that's why people like it. I don't think all these people would come just to celebrate making a lot of money. They're here to celebrate, I'd say, a set of values. It's like the Catholic catechism.
How so?
Well, it never changes, for one thing.
Yeah. It usually has old guys in charge.
And has old white males in charge, absolutely.
We're seeing the wisdom of that more and more as we go along. Yeah, Charlie was practicing law, but I said, Charlie, it's okay as a hobby, but forget it.
I know. He was right. It took him a while to convince me, but I'm a slow learner sometimes.
People wonder how long you guys can keep doing this. Charlie, you're 94. Warren, you're 87. But you made it look pretty easy up there on stage this weekend.
It is easy, actually, at this point. At some point it won't be, but no, I would say it's as easy now as ever. I mean, you didn't see me enter the race that took place over the weekend or anything of the sort. But this job doesn't really require hand-eye coordination or stamina or anything. You know, you just sit at a desk and you apply things that you learned 60 or 70 years ago, and they come in a little different form now, maybe this way or that way. But it's the perfect job for somebody that wants to be working at 80 or 90.
You mentioned that you have had disagreements in ways of thinking over the years. What's the biggest thing that either of you can remember disagreeing on, even though it wasn't a fight or didn't get into anything? Where is an area where one of you thought you should do something, the other one didn't, or vice versa?
I wanted Berkshire to buy the French stake in Costco when the French left.
What year was that?
Oh, that was a long time ago.
I was at a bridge. I was playing at a bridge tournament. They actually called me out of this thing, which is very bad etiquette at bridge tournaments. And Charlie is basically saying the French firm, big retailing firm there, had about a 15% block or something like that. And Charlie says, "Shut your eyes and buy it." And
he said, "I'm going to shut my eyes and say no."
I should have bought it.
You should have bought it?
Absolutely. In fact, I can hardly think of anything Charlie has recommended that I do that shouldn't have been done. I would do more things than Charlie would, but that's partly because I'm there, 8 hours a day or something. I've got a little more inclination toward action, and Charlie wants to really wait for the fat pitch. I mean, he would be very happy hitting 10 home runs and 10 home runs at bat in the final game of the World Series in his life, and just have that be it in securities, and that's the right way to proceed. But I like a little more action.
All right, well, the billionaires keep showing up. Bill Gates is here. We're going to have more from this Berkshire Summit in just a moment. Let's get to our Billionaire Summit this morning. Joining us right now is Bill Gates. He is the co-founder of Microsoft. He's also a Berkshire board member. Charlie Munger is the vice chairman of Berkshire Hathaway. And still with us this morning, Warren Buffett, who's the chairman and CEO of Berkshire Hathaway. And gentlemen, welcome. Thank you all for being here this morning.
Thanks for having us.
I was trying to figure out how to get into these conversations with the three of you, and it's always difficult. The three of you are brilliant thinkers. It can be a little intimidating, but I was thinking back over the years of the times that we've sat down, and you are all very similar in a lot of ways. You're analytical thinkers, you're logical thinkers, you're voracious readers, and you're all people who think knowledge is the ultimate quest. You want to figure out how the world works. But it occurs to me that part of the reason that you're friends is not just because of what you share in common, but that sometimes you have differing opinions on these things. And you probably like to challenge each other on some of these issues. And I thought maybe we could tease out some of those issues this morning where you may not see eye to eye exactly on things. You may have more nuanced views on areas. So I'm just going to throw up some areas this morning and see where you all agree and see where you all differ. And so I'll start with the idea of the markets, because this is where we started with Warren this morning at 6 a.m. 6 a.m. Eastern, I should point out. Just the idea of where the markets are right now. Are they fairly valued? Are they expensive? Is it hard to find things that you like? Bill, why don't we start with you, since you're just sitting down with us. Warren pointed out that it looks pretty expensive to him on a lot of private deals that come along, and it's pretty hard to find bargains in the market. You're a big investor, too. What do you think when you look at the market today?
Well, in terms of absolute returns, you've got the 10-year at around 3%. And so that's your risk-free rate in dollars. So expecting to make a lot more than 3% on things, either you're being smarter than everybody else or you're taking some level of risk. So absolute returns are predicted to be lower over these next 10 years than they've been in most 10-year periods.
Absolute returns on stocks?
On all asset classes. The T-bill sets the rules, the strength of gravity. And so I don't know, if you ask investors, I think they expect to earn, just say state pension plans have 7.5%, a few still at 8%. That's an unrealistic expectation, which makes those deficits a little worse, actually quite a bit worse than they appear on paper.
Mm-hmm. Charlie, what do you think?
I agree with Bill.
You have nothing further to add?
I have nothing further to add.
All right.
But I accept one thing. I think Berkshire's going to do a little better.
Bill, you agree with that too?
Oh, absolutely.
So what does Berkshire do that gives it that advantage?
We're less crazy. There are certain bad habits we don't have.
Such as?
There are a million ways to be irrational. And while we're irrational pretty often, we're less often irrational than most people. That really helps.
Our bad habits are not financial.
I don't suppose you want to go into any detail there.
I'll talk about Charlie's, but I'm not going to talk about it.
All right, let's talk a little bit about the dabbling you all may do. You each have your own money, aside from Berkshire money, that you look and you invest. And Charlie, I know you've looked to China a lot of times when you start looking at places that you like.
The Munger family has invested in China substantially.
Since when and why?
Since about 14 years ago. And I did it because I respected the man who was going to do the investing. And it all looked inexpensive to me, and the companies looked very strong to me. And of course, this worked out. I've done way better than I had any right to expect.
Does it still look that way when you look to the Chinese markets?
I think that the best companies in China are cheaper than the best companies in the United States.
The concern other investors might have before they follow in that way is that they don't know that much about Chinese companies and maybe...
They're just generally afraid of China.
Is there a reason that they may have some... I mean, you have people who are guiding you who understand China well. If someone was trying to do this on their own, would it be a little more dangerous?
Sure, it really helps to understand the country you're operating in, of course.
All right, that's a stupid question moment. You would not necessarily advise others to do this, I guess is my point, for investors who are sitting at home watching.
I don't think it would be all that hard for any smart person to find 4 or 5 great companies in China to invest in.
All right, Bill, how about you? When you look around, what areas are catching your fancy? I know of things that you've done in the past, areas where you've kind of gotten into currency markets or done different things, but what are you thinking right now? What captures?
Well, my tech investing is almost entirely the Microsoft stock. I think in terms of things that will have super high returns, there are tech stocks that are undervalued. You're just going to get very high variance out of tech stocks because you have some markets where the winner ends up getting a substantial profit pool. Because I don't want to have a conflict with Microsoft, I don't invest a lot in other tech stocks, but I create a fantasy portfolio to see if my predictive power is good or not. Outside of that, I have a team of people who invest, and they're quite diversified. They have a fair bit in China. China looks quite attractive.
Who's on your fantasy technology league?
I probably shouldn't talk about that. I mean, there's some that are still private, like Airbnb, which at at a fair valuation, that's a strong long-term business.
Why?
Because they serve customers globally, and so the reputation and listings they have, you can't just go into one city like you might for a ride service and bomb the prices, go get the drivers and do a lot of marketing and just compete in that one city. Here, you have to have global reputation, global inventory. And so it just makes challenging that leader's position far more difficult.
I mean, I've always kind of thought of Airbnb and the ride services as having some of the similar risks in terms of local regulations that could get in the way with things. Does that not concern you with an Airbnb?
Oh, absolutely. But they're, city by city, they get to deal with that. It's a barrier to entry for other people who come along. The competitive dynamics for the ride services versus the Airbnb are different in Airbnb's favor.
I won't ask you for your entire list of fantasy technology companies because you already told me you wouldn't tell me. But is Apple on that list with Berkshire plowing so much money into it?
Well, Apple's an amazing company, and the multiple's not gigantic. It's not like a tech speculative company where it's still losing money or anything. So, I think Warren's applied, great thinking there. The top tech companies do have a very strong profit position right now, but Apple has the most of all.
And Warren, I guess when you have described this company, the reason you like Apple is not reasons that are technology-based reasons. You think of it as a consumer goods company.
I mean, it's the consumer behavior with the product, what they do with it, how it becomes part of their lives, and all that sort of thing that I observe and primarily reason from. Now, there was something coming out tomorrow that would obsolete everything that made it attractive to that group. Bill would know it before I would. But it has a position in consumers' minds that is, and a utility to them that's very, very, very useful, and it's an incredible ecosystem that they have found ways to profit more from as they've gone along. I should mention that both of these fellows have done way better with their non-Berkshire holdings than I have.
Warren, you don't even have an iPhone, so
a fellow sent me a 10 the other day, but I haven't. I'm not using it yet. It was a very nice fellow, though. I even explained. I think he pretended he was writing to his 3-year-old child, and he wrote me this very nice letter and explained what to do with it. It wouldn't bite me or do anything like that. And I'm kind of screwing up my courage here, and one of these days I'll move.
Charlie, do you have an iPhone?
Of course not.
What do you think about Apple?
I've given up my adding machine.
What do you think about Apple? Do you have a thought on the stock?
Yes, I wish we owned more of it.
Yeah, we talked about it.
I wish we owned more of it.
Why?
I think we've been a little too restrained.
$43 billion is not enough?
No.
What do you like about the company?
Well, I like the fact that it's reasonably priced and strong. That's a very desirable combination.
And the management.
I like the
intelligent about how they use it.
Yes, oh yes.
Yeah.
Very intelligent management.
Let me ask you, Charlie, about some comments that you made over the weekend that people paid attention to. My Twitter feed lit up when I tweeted about some of them, specifically when you started talking about Bitcoin as turds. Why?
I'm surprised that attracted any attention.
Why did you equate the two?
Well, Bitcoin is worthless artificial gold, which, if it succeeded, would facilitate a lot of illicit activity. Now, that is not something I think the world needs. And the fact that it's clever computer science doesn't mean that it should be widely used and that respectable people should encourage other people to speculate in it. Bitcoin reminds me of Oscar Wilde's definition of fox hunting, the pursuit of the uneatable by the unspeakable.
Well, it sounds better than what I used before.
We asked earlier, Charlie, Andrew brought it up with Warren, but
I think it's a scumball activity. Does that better serve you better?
thank you. Yeah, we asked earlier about Goldman Sachs getting into the business of having a trading desk for Bitcoin. Berkshire Hathaway owns about $2.5 billion of Goldman Sachs. Does it bother you, or does it not surprise you? Just
Well, I don't expect every investment bank to agree with everything I think. They have a lot of animal spirits in investment banking.
Bill, Charlie and Warren have weighed in on Bitcoin. Do you own any?
Somebody gave me some for my birthday, and then a few years later I thought, hey, I'm going to sell that. So no. There's some really good technology in terms of sharing databases and verifying transactions that is talked about as blockchain. That is a good thing. Bitcoin and ICOs, I agree completely. It's one of the crazier speculative things where it's not as an asset class, you're not producing anything, and so you shouldn't expect it to go up. It's kind of a pure greater fool theory type investment. So, you know, I agree. I would short it if there was an easy way to do it.
One of the interesting things, if people react when you criticize their investment, if they get mad, they're gambling. You know, if somebody criticizes Apple or Berkshire, we like it. I mean, if the stock goes down, we'll buy more of it because it's we don't care whether it's just we don't feel that it has anything to do with it. But if we criticize something that they own because they only want it to go up tomorrow, they feel we are hurting them, and therefore they get very upset about it. If they really like what they own, what difference would it make? You know, if I criticize their wife or something, they don't get all upset about it.
Wait a minute. That's a bad habit.
Yeah, probably not the perfect example to use.
In terms of privacy issues, we spoke with Warren about this earlier. What's happened in Silicon Valley, privacy issues surrounding Facebook and Twitter and Google and Apple, and how that has kind of weighed on those FANG stocks, has a lot of people looking towards Washington, wondering if there will be regulation that comes down, and looking towards the European Union, where regulation is coming this month. Bill, you've dealt with regulatory close scrutiny in the past. Is this something that you think is likely to have an impact in Silicon Valley? Will the regulators come? Will it change things in Silicon Valley, and will it make it tougher for these companies to follow their business models?
Well, privacy is a super important issue, but I do think that the big companies, even as regulation comes, which is inevitable, they'll be able to handle it. People don't mind having a little bit of demographic information about themselves used to target ads. That's value added to the user. You know, there are issues about medical records or the content of your communications that are very private. One challenge with the privacy laws is making sure small companies can still get involved in the ad market. These rules could block lots of new companies. So I think the challenge of privacy can be met. The challenge of what gets published on a platform, hate speech, free speech, fake news, and what you allow people to get outraged about, you know, and what you should do. Every government has a view, and so making sure the government takes the responsibility for those rules, I think that's one of the toughest things for any platform where people are expressing opinions. So that's a separate issue, and I think the harder of the two.
You mean acting as a publisher rather than a bulletin board, going all the way back to CompuServe?
Right, and if people expect you to stop certain things and not others, they'll always view that in retrospect. And it's a real-time system with millions of people writing things. Those judgment calls, you need some standards group of the government, not a private corporation to make those calls.
Charlie, what do you think?
Well, I think we always use television ads to flog the idiots of each party to the polls and to sell them in a very misleading way. And we're just shifting the misleading ads to a different medium. I do think it works better. In other words, I think the Facebook thing, it's really good at flogging angry idiots to the polls. And I think that changes the equation some.
Changes the equation, meaning you think it
It
works?
has an effect on politics.
It has an effect on politics and therefore will bring in regulation?
I think it therefore won't be in regulation.
Because the
It's
politicians...
hard to control people who want to be silly about politics.
Andrew has a question.